In the Amismis region, many homes collapsed. 1,000 families moved into temporary tents, exposed to heat, no privacy, and uncertainty. But for women, this experience is not just about shelter. It's about health, about safety, about survival. And it intensified the difficulties that women faced. Therefore, our research asks, did the earthquake amplify women's vulnerabilities? And how did those difficulties manifest? Housing damage, climate change, and health? To explore this, we conducted fieldwork in Amismis, visiting both reconstructed and destroyed houses, interviewing women in village, and speaking with designers, architects, government officials, and local authorities to understand what really shapes the challenges women face today. To begin with, we looked at housing, the most visible form of destruction, and perhaps the least equally rebuilt. After the earthquake, many families, especially women, lost their homes. Women faced extreme hardships, overcrowded tents, lack of privacy, and no safe toilets. The tents were unbearably hot in summer and freezing cold in winter. Although the government recorded the needs of people living in tents in notebooks, it was still unable to respond to their requests quickly. There were no toilets built in the disaster area, and women had to go to a farther place to solve the problem. Especially at night, the lack of lighting in the village makes it difficult to ensure safety and accessibility for women when using the toilet. Due to limited facilities, women had to bathe in makeshift tents, a situation that continued for around 8 months. After that time, government began the reconstruction process. Some families moved into new houses. Living conditions improved. The government dispersed housing funds in for installments, usually received by the male homeowners. During this process, women had little say. It was typically men negotiated with designers and oversaw the hiring of laborers. Research has shown that single women homeowners are often more vulnerable in disaster recovery. Our fieldwork in Amismis confirmed this. We met a woman who, unlike most here, she is a female homeowner, a rare case in this village. She is living alone for some reasons. For many years, she has lived without her family.
When the earthquake struck, my world crumbled. For months, I lived in that tent, exposed to the heat of summer, the cold of winter, alone in the dark at night. No one to share my burden and no one to help.
Just a week ago, she moved into this house. A house without doors, without windows, and without a sense of safety. Unlike households led by men, where government funds are typically managed by male heads, single women must navigate the reconstruction process alone. They receive the same funding as other families, but without additional support for labor, materials, or expertise. These funds are often insufficient. This woman is a clear example. She received government funds to rebuild, but the money ran out long before the house was complete. The government only covers construction costs, but not electricity bills, maintenance, or basic living expenses. The government has promised additional support for women like her, but for now, those are just promises, have not yet become a reality for her. Every day, she wakes up in this unfinished space, with no stable source of earnings. She struggles to pay for food, water, and the electricity she now has to pay herself. For single women living alone like her, the challenge is not just about building walls, but about securing a stable and dignified life. In another way, the earthquake has significantly impacted women's and girls' physical and mental health. Many women reported frequent fear, anxiety, and psychological stress following the disaster.
In Amismis, women shoulder the responsibilities of washing, cooking, caring for children, and working on the farms. Our days repeat in an unchanging cycle, marked by monotony and hardship.
The earthquake destroyed many workplaces, leaving most men without jobs. Some became irritable, directing their frustration toward female in their family. These women already burdened with the trauma from the disaster. Now, their mental stress has only grown heavier. The destruction of crops and cooperatives, once vital sources of income for women, left many without financial security. This loss not only deepened their economic hardship, but also intensified the emotional and psychological stress they carried. Through our interviews, we learned that some
Personnellement, moi, je
NGOs,
lis,
such
je
as
parle de
Project
tout
Hope
ça, je
and
parle
HAF,
effectivement
are
ce que
working
j'ai, je
together
le
to provide
partage
psychological
avec
counseling,
beaucoup qui
mental
travaillent avec
health
moi.
workshops, and
Je
support group
partage
activities
mes,
for
ma
women in the
pension de
affected
retraite,
areas.
je la partage avec
However,
ceux qui
the
travaillent
reach
chez
of
moi.
these
Et
psychological
je n'ai rien
intervention
caché,
programs remains limited, focusing mainly on
j'essaie de
specific
partager
communities
et
and the most severely affected women, and
avec
has yet
des
to
groupes
achieve
forts pour
widespread
placer
coverage. As for the
des
cooperatives that
species
once offered women
that
additional job
significantly
opportunities, the
in
government has announced
Marrakesh
reconstruction
forests.
plans.
The host
However,
of
due to the
this
involvement
cooperative
of multiple
scholarship
departments, the reconstruction
cooperatives
process has been slow,
and
leaving many women
for to
still
find
waiting for their
solution they
livelihoods to be
see look
restored.
for help.
In terms of physical health, the lack of private and hygienic toileting and cleaning conditions. Some women develop infections and menstrual irregularities. Girls are at increased health and safety risk and susceptible to physiological infections due to the use of coeducational shared toilets and lack of adequate supervision in schools. When we raised such a question, the local architect said that the new public toilets to be built after the disaster would be of separate designs for men and women to ensure women's privacy and safety. Lastly, we learned that women's access to healthcare is severely limited. During the earthquake, only one medical vehicle was stationed in the affected area for 2 days, leaving many women and girls without timely medical care. To address this, the government has since deployed nurses to each village and expanded health services, aiming to ensure that more women receive timely care and support. Finally, there is one factor that cannot be overlooked: climate change. In recent years, declining rainfall and increasing drought have made agricultural income increasingly unstable. When water is scarce, residents must pay extra to transport water for crop irrigation. Women who depend on farming income are among those hit the hardest. In summary, our research found that the earthquake's impact on Amisma's women created a chain of interconnected vulnerabilities. Disasters themselves do not create inequality, but they reveal and amplify existing social problems. After the Amisma's earthquake, gender norms embedded in the reconstruction process, such as male ownership of most houses and the neglect of women's hygiene needs, turned what were intended as fair policies into unequal realities. At the same time, economic pressures and climate-related agricultural instability increased women's financial dependence on men, making the so-called equal aid policies ineffective in practice. However, outside of this fragile chain, women's cooperatives were once an important practice in breaking down structural inequality. The cooperative not only empowers women to be economically independent, improves literacy, and achieves practical grounding in legal empowerment, such as driver's licenses, but also helps them to break free from their economic dependence on men. Our research began with a question: did the earthquake worsen the difficulties faced by women? And what we found is that these difficulties are not just caused by the disaster itself, but by the systems that shape women's lives. Homes can be rebuilt, roads can be repaired, but true recovery is about more than reconstruction. It is about recognition, dignity, safety, and equality.
This is my first time to visit this village after the earthquake, and hearing their voice and the stories about the women, I was really moved. And I realized that after the earthquake, the post-disaster recovery isn't just about rebuilding their houses, it's about rebuilding their lives. So their strength is really inspiring.
The research made me realize that the post-disaster is not only about material reshaping, but also relieves the unequal distribution of power. The voice of women are not absent, but deliberately ignored. We should ensure that women are not only seen, but also heard.
This field trip was a golden opportunity for me to deepen my understanding of gender equality. I realized that the gap between what promised on paper and what experienced in everyday life remain wide and complex.
So in this research, I found that these women's resilience should be recognized, and I hope more people can see and hear their voice. Girls always help girls. The sport between the women is the truest strength in terms of the hardship. It's not only about rebuilding house, but it's also about rebuilding the home.